Well, before we turn to God's Word, let's turn to Him in prayer. Lord, we thank you for your Word. We thank you that by it we know who you are and we know who we are. God, the topics that we're going to be getting into over these next few weeks are big topics. They're heavy topics. They're lofty topics as we talk about who you are. Lord, so as we probe this question of who is God, we pray that you would meet us. Lord, I pray that I would not speak anything of you that is not true, that you would make my words be words that are from you, that are empowered by your Spirit. Lord, I pray that you would help us all to have enlarged minds and hearts as we think more about who you are and allow ourselves and our thoughts of you to be shaped by what you actually tell us. Lord, we ask all these things in your name. Amen. Well, this morning we are looking at, we're going to read from the book of Acts, Acts chapter 17, verses 16 through the first part of verse 28. I invite you to turn there. Acts 17, it's in the New Testament. Just after the Gospels, Acts 17. Okay, people of God, hear God's word to us. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he's waiting for his co-workers, Silas and Timothy, to join him. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Well, then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Well, Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship as something unknown, or actually Paul says something you are ignorant of, I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of people, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that people everywhere would seek him, and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live, and we move, and we have our being." This is the word of the Lord, and we say, thanks be to God. Well, our thoughts of God are not great enough, says theologian J.I. Packer. And this is the basic conviction that is going to underlie this whole new sermon series that we are calling, Who is God? Well, our thoughts about God, our answer to this question, is perhaps the most important thing about us. Because how we answer this question, who is God, has a bearing on every part of our life. Well, it impacts how we view the world. Our thoughts of God impact how we view ourselves. Our thoughts of God impact how we interact in the workplace, how we view our job, how we treat our family, our thoughts of God impact how we view and how we respond to death? Oh, of course, our thoughts of God have a bearing on how we worship. If we have a low view of God, well, then our worship of God is going to be less than adequate. Now, how we view God impacts how we receive the message of Jesus Christ, this gospel message. Now, the gospel message may not mean anything. It might mean very little to somebody who has a very limited or small or misguided view of God. Our thoughts of God are not great enough. We were told in the Gospel of John, we heard it in the words of assurance today, where Jesus says, "This is eternal life, that they know God. They know the only true God and Jesus Christ, whom he has sent." We were created to know God. But I wonder, how much are we like the teachers in Athens, the Areopagus, where Paul says to them, "I see that you are very religious. I see that you are very committed to these gods. I see that you are devout to doing the things of your religion. Well, you are very religious, but you are ignorant. You are ignorant of the one true God." Well, now, I wonder how much of us is like that. We are very religious, but we are ignorant of this one true God. Now, for how long have we called ourselves Christian, and yet we don't know? We don't know, we can't account for who this God is. We don't know much about this one God, this only true God that we are worshiping. I wonder how many of us are basing our thoughts or ideas on God, not based on how he has revealed himself to us, but how many of us have been enticed by modern beliefs, people telling us who God is? Well, now our view of God is shaped by some modern beliefs or teachings that are coming out. And so I'm just wondering how many of our thoughts are based on these same kinds of beliefs, where we have an image of God in our mind that's not of the true and one God, but it's a made-up image, that we have a fabricated God that's based a little bit on the teaching of the Bible. It's based a little bit on what we've heard or read in podcasts. It's based a little bit about what our parents have said, what we've heard from our friends. And then finally, it's based probably in large part on how we feel. Our thoughts of God are not great enough. And so this sermon series that we're going to be spending time in is looking at this question. We're going to be probing this question, who is God? And the aim of it is to have our hearts and our minds expanded so that we might know God as he has revealed himself to us in his word. Well, the aim of this sermon series is for us to leave wanting to explore this further, wanting to sink deeper into God's word, asking this question, Lord, who are you? And allowing our hearts and our minds to be shaped, allowing our worship and our praise of God to be that much greater. And now to do this, we are going to be spending the next several weeks looking at the attributes of God, the characteristics of God. And the one that we're looking at this morning is the aseity of God, or the self-existence of God. And now this week, when you are hanging out with your friends, when you are hanging out or talking with your family, you're probably going to say, oh, you won't believe this. This was the best sermon I've ever heard. I have my faith and my mind has been so enlarged by this sermon. And they're going to say, wow, well, what was that sermon about? And you're going to say, it was this word. I can't remember what it was. The aseity of God. And to help you remember this, I want you to think of Foghorn Leghorn. That big rooster guy back in cartoons where he says, I say, now I say. So we're talking about the aseity of God. Some people say it aseity, some people say it aseity. We're going to say it aseity of God, the self-existence of God. And if this has just been too big for you already, and you're about to check out, we're just going to give a really short, condensed version of what this sermon is going to be about. Because what we're getting at in this sermon is the question, who made God? Who made God? And the answer to that question is no one. God has always been. Nobody created God. God did not create himself. He has always been the Aseity of God. Now let's talk a little bit about what that means. Well, August 18th, 1984 was an important day in history. My history, at least. You might not know that day, but that was the day that I was born. August 18th, 1984 is my birthday. And 9 months before that, I did not even exist. Well, think about that. Spend some time thinking about that each and every one of us has a specific day, 9 months, give or take, before that, when we did not even exist. Now, it's hard for us to think about this, for our existence to think about our non-existence. But there was a time when we didn't exist. And we didn't get to a place where we thought, oh, I'm ready to exist. I'm ready to be created. And then we were born. No, something had to happen. Something outside of us had to act and to create us. We went from non-existence to existence without any control over it. Something happened to us so that we were created. Well, the aseity of God is the self-existence of God, meaning that nobody created God. Nothing created God. God is not self-created, meaning that God did not make himself. Because if God made himself, that means that there was a time when he didn't exist. But God has been from everlasting to everlasting, as we read in our call to worship this morning. Well, there's a theologian, A.W. Pink, who has a classic work on the attributes of God. And I'm going to read a quote that he says, and I'm going to quote it at length, where he says, "There was a time when God, in the unity of his nature," so there was a time when God, in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, dwelt all alone. "In the beginning, God," he quotes Genesis 1:1, "at the very start, in the beginning, God. There was no heaven, where his glory is now manifest. There was no earth to engage his attention. There were no angels to sing his praises. No universe to be upheld by the word of his power. There was nothing. There was no one but God. And that not for a day, not for a year, not for an age, but from everlasting. During eternity past, God was alone, self-contained, self-sufficient, self-satisfied, in need of nothing." End quote. Well, God has always been. The aseity of God, the self-existence of God. Really, we're going to talk about two things that this means this morning. First, if God is self-existent, the self-existence of God, that means that all of life originates from God. If God was the only thing that existed, that means that everything else must have come from him. This is what Paul is getting at when he's talking to the teachers in Athens, when he says that God himself gave everything breath. God himself gave everything life and everything that was needed. Well, if anything exists, it's because God gives it life. Well, if nothing existed before, then there would be nothing to bring about creation. But we know that God existed, and in him that life dwelt. And now everything that has life, it has been given to them by God. So that's first. Well, the second thing, really, that this means, the self-existence of God, the aseity of God, is that God is not dependent on anyone or anything. God is independent of his creation. Now I am dependent. You are dependent. We need food. We need water. We need air. We need other people. Other people and the resources of the earth. We need these in order to have our most basic and our most complex needs met. Now it's an exercise of extreme humility to go throughout your day just looking at, taking account of what we are dependent on. Now, as you slept last night, as you were unconscious in your sleeping, did you keep yourself alive? Did you keep your heart beating? Now this morning, the food that you've already consumed, did you produce that yourself? Or did you have to go to the store to get it? And if you did produce that food, did you cause the plants to grow? Did you cause the plant to produce fruit? Though we are dependent. We are dependent for everything that we have. But God, on the other hand, is independent. Well, God, if God existed before everything else was created, well, then God holds all things in his hand. He was self-sufficient. He was self-satisfied, in need of nothing. God doesn't create because he's lonely. He didn't say, oh, I was bored. I'm bored. Let me create something so that I can entertain myself. No, God did not need that. Well, God did not create because he is in need of worship. I heard this analogy used by a pastor during my studies. We often come to Thursday or Friday feeling a little bit more exhausted, in need of worship, in need of connecting with God's people. God doesn't come to Thursday and Friday and say, man, I am really wiped out. I am drained from this past week. I can't wait to hear Kevin jamming on the guitar at Trinity. I can't wait to hear Doug Smith just banging on the drums, lifting up in worship. I can't wait to hear Bertha Groot just hammering on the keys of the organ in praise to me. God doesn't need our worship. He has everything that he needs inside of himself. God is self-existent. The aseity of God. Well, this is what Paul is pointing to when he says, in him we have all of our life, all of our breath, all of our meaning. God, it's not like God is served by human hands. We don't create a temple for him to live in. No, he gives us everything we need. We are dependent on him and not the other way around. In Romans, Paul says, who is given to God that God should repay them. No, God is not in need of anything that we give. We do not add anything to God's essence. Nothing in creation gives to God something that he needs. So from God flows all of life, all of breath, all of meaning, and all of being. And God is independent of his creation. But I don't want you to have this picture that this is a sterile God, that this is a distant God, a God who has removed himself from all creation, because this is maybe the most mind-blowing, mind-boggling, exciting thing about this whole doctrine. That even though God is the creator, even though God is self-sufficient, self-contained, self-satisfied, in need of nothing, God chooses to create. And not only does God choose to create, he chooses to reveal himself to us in ways that we can understand. And then finally, the most exciting part is that this self-existent, infinite God, this perfect, eternal God, chooses to enter into relationship with us. He chooses, by his own will, to engage this finite creation, saying, I want you to know me. This is what Paul says. He said God creates and God arranges history so that people might know him, so that they might seek him out and find him. God creates because he wants us to have life, because he knows that life is found in him, so he is directing people back to himself. In him is all life and all breath and all meaning and all being. Now, practically, how does this work out in our lives? I want to suggest just briefly, just three brief ways that this really kind of takes root in our life and applies to our everyday. First, the aseity of God. If God is self-existent, God existing before all time, holding all life, then this is where we go for all of our need. God holds all things in his hands, so why would we not come to him? There is nothing that God cannot give to us. Now, he may not give us what we want. He may not give us what we think we need, but God has the power. God has the knowledge to give us exactly what he knows that we need, and so we go to him for all of that. Now, oftentimes, we think of God as somebody like us, like a human, but just maybe a little bit smarter, maybe a little bit more powerful, with like a little bit more knowledge. But this is not God. We are the creation, and God is the creator. He stands outside of creation. And so we turn to God, knowing that no problem is too big for God. No need is too big for God. So first, we turn to God for life. Well, second, in our turning, we consider how it is, our posture to him. Now, are we coming to God expecting that God owes us something, expecting that God needs to do something for us? Are we approaching God in this arrogant way? Now, back in Paul's time, there were Greek gods and there were Roman gods that the people went to for all of their needs. And the way that it worked out was that there was a god for everything. If you needed help with childbirth, then you would go to a specific god. If you needed help with your crops or money, then you would go to another god. If you needed help with love, then you would go to yet another god. And now what you do is you would do something for this god, do something to appease this god, and then the god would help you out in that specific area. This was I'll scratch your back, and then you can scratch my back. Now, do you think that this is how the self-existent God works? Do you think that God needs you to scratch his back? Well, remember, this is the self-existent God who stands outside of all creation. Well, God does not owe us anything. God is not indebted to us in any way. So when we approach God in humility, asking God to give us whatever we need, recognizing that everything that comes from him is not obligation. He's not obligated to give us anything, but it comes as a gift. And so we come in humility, asking for what we need, not trying to earn God's favor. This is really what grace is all about. The Creator God coming to us, making us alive, giving us life, and giving us everything we need. The gospel message contained just in who God is. Well, the third thing, practically speaking, is that this gives us confidence, and this gives us assurance. God is one who stands outside of creation, not dependent on it. God is not swayed when things happen in this world that trouble us. God is not limited in his power. He's not limited in his knowledge. There is nothing that has the ability to thwart God's plan. There's nothing that has the ability to prevent God's plan from coming to pass. So this gives us confidence that God's word will be fulfilled. And God's word to us is that we might know him and that we might have life. This is what God is desiring to give. And this is what God will give, because nobody can prevent God's plans from happening. So people of God, rejoice. People of God, praise his name. Bless his name for who he is, for what he's done. People of God, rest assured that this God has come to us, that we know this God through Jesus Christ, and may we seek him, may we find him, may we know him as he has revealed himself to be to us. And may all of it be to his praise and to his honor and to his glory. And all of God's people said together, Amen.